call the meeting to order. Hold, please. You are live.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today for our Board of Finance Committee meeting. To begin the program or begin the committee meeting, I would ask Rachel to call the quorum.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Chair Balducci,
Here.
Regent Gray Kemp. Absence is noted. Regent Santiago. Absence is noted. Regent Stewart.
That out.
Here.
Here.
Thank you.
I'm here.
Thank you. Madam Chair Ryan,
I'm here, thank you.
and welcome to our ex officio Professor Blitz. We have
Yes,
a-
present.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think we're going to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. Is there a motion to do so? Thank you, Mayor, for your motion. I will second that. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? Thank you. Before we move on to our agenda items, I think I would like to ask for a motion to add content to the agenda D, tuition and fee adjustments. I know it was sent out. I had gotten mine a little bit late, and so some of you may have gotten the original and not gotten the addition as we moved along. So what we'd like to do is add that fee schedule for Charter Oak and Connecticut State to add to our agenda today. Is there a motion to do so? Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. I will second that motion. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed? Thank you very much. The agenda is amended. Moving right along to the first item on our agenda, I'm going to turn it over to Ben.
Actually, this one is for Keith. Keith is online, so we should.
Oh, he's got all the good news. Okay.
The first
Oh, I
couple.
haven't seen him in a while. Keith, welcome back. Haven't seen you, my friend.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Looking forward to your input. Thank you.
So the first item, I think I could be brief. All of you are aware that the CSCU 2020 program was a major capital funding source for the universities between FY09 and FY21, and 2 years, FY15 and 16 for the colleges. Legislation allows that the board approve the reallocation of unspent and unallocated project funds when a project closes out to another project or program. And we have listed 4 projects that are closed out. The funds have been returned from DCS or DAS to us, or all equipment and technology purchases are complete. It's a total, well, the projects is Health and Human Services at Southern, Goddard Hall, and the Fine Arts Building at Eastern, and Willard and DiLoretto Hall at Central. I won't go through the exact dollar amount, but the total is $6.7 million. So we're asking to have the board approve as listed on item 3 in the chart to reallocate those funds, approve reallocating those funds back to the university that the projects exist at. And those dollars will get reallocated to the campus's code compliance infrastructure improvement program.
Thank you, Keith. Are there any comments or questions? This is something we've done often in the past when we have those kind of dollars and reallocation help finish other projects and so on. I would make the motion that we adopt the resolution. Is there a second? Thank you, Mayor. Second, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? Resolution's adopted. Thank you. Moving right along to our second agenda item, which deals with Gateway Community College. Is Keith doing that one?
Sure.
Keith, why don't you do that one also?
Sure. Gateway Community College has a couple of manufacturers, automotive manufacturers that are sponsors of the program that donate cars on an annual basis. One of the sponsors is General Motors. General Motors has donated a 2001 Acadia, GMC Acadia, with a market value of $12,300 to Gateway's automotive program. These vehicles that they donate are not roadworthy. They can't be registered. Therefore, laboratory experiments, taking apart and putting back together again. And I just noticed there is a mistake that I'll have to correct in the resolution. In the first whereas, it lists the vehicle as a terrain. It is not, it's an Acadia, and in the resolved section, it is correctly referenced, but we'll make that correction for the final board, the full board meeting. But we're asking the board to approve accepting the 2021 GMC Acadia.
Thank you, Keith. That's a technical correction. We will do that. I appreciate that. I will make the motion that we adopt the resolution. Discussion.
Sure, I'll second it.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Any discussion by any members? Hearing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The resolution's adopted. Moving to the third item on our agenda. Actually,
We have to do that one. There's no other.
oh, excuse me, yes. Third item is salary approval for our management confidential policy. I'll turn that over to Ben.
Yes, good morning, Rich, members of the committee. Under the management confidential policy that we have for establishing pay rates and managing personnel policies for management confidential employees, we are limited to making offers of employment within the lower half range of the range of salaries for each grade. And if it is above between half and 3/4 can be approved by the chancellor of the system, and above 3/4 of the range requires board approval. In this particular case, Central Connecticut State University has asked for approval to make a hiring salary offer to a candidate for the position of Chief Human Resources Officer of $198,000, which is just shy of the top of the range for the position. The efforts to secure a Chief Human Resources Central have taken some time. There is a shortage of experienced and well-qualified human resources professionals in the state, something I can attest to from our own experiences hiring at other levels around the system. So they have identified an individual and would like and have negotiated a salary, and in order to retain his name is Christopher Wethge. In order to secure his services, they would like to offer a starting salary of $198,000, which requires board approval. His resume is included in the packet. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'll put that in the form of a motion to adopt that resolution. Second, Mayor Stewart. Thank you. Discussion.
Yeah, I'll second it. Just be careful because I may not want to second some things today.
Guess I'm on notice then. Thank you for that. Discussion. Did you have your hand up, David?
No.
Comments by anyone else? Any members? Would try your minds. All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Resolution's adopted. Thank you. Moving along now to tuition and fee adjustments. Number 4, Ben.
Yes, the item on your agenda includes 4 separate related actions having to do with tuition fees across the system. As you may recall, we adopted a tuition fee increase for the universities last fall, based on our desire to adopt tuition fees for the universities earlier in their a cycle of accepting applicants and establishing mutual aid packages. However, we deferred action on the Connecticut State Community College and Charter Oak tuition while we awaited action on the state budget. And so based on that action, and because we're here and we need to do this now, we have proposed a tuition and fee schedule for Connecticut State Community College for fiscal 24, a tuition and fee schedule for Charter Oak State College. In addition, there is a new Tier 2 lab fee recommended for Central Connecticut State University, the theater department. And finally, there is a forming application to the policy regarding C2 states collection of fees that changes the format of our collection of late drop fees. The tuition fee for Connecticut State Community College that is recommended is explained in the staff report. Amounts to a 5% increase in tuition and fees. That number, the recommended tuition fee increases results in a combined increase of $27 for a 1 credit class, and an annual increase of $266 for a full-time student attending full-time for 2 semesters. So the maximum price for a full year of credits at community colleges will rise from $4,700 to $4,966. I would point out that the staff report at Connecticut State have identified that the increase in the Pell Grants is sufficient to completely ensure that any Pell eligible student will have sufficient resources under their Pell Grant to fully cover tuition and fees and a meaningful contribution toward their cost of attendance. The proposal for Charter Oak State College is to increase, is to adopt the tuition rate schedule, which reflects a 3% increase in tuition and fees for undergraduate programs and a 2% increase for graduate programs. Obviously, all of these tuition and fee schedules are in the context of the spending plan, which we'll discuss later in this agenda, and both Charter Oak and CTC have budget deficits in fiscal 24 and the prospect of more acute deficits in the out years, and their recommendation for tuition increases must be considered in that context. However, in the case of Charter Oak, their recommended tuition increase also, I think, is a reflection of their estimation of the market forces that face online education, and this allows them to be in a competitive position with other online providers of education with whom they compete. So that's why they went with the lower 3% and 2% for graduate. The lab fee for Connecticut State is a $10. Make sure I'm right about that. It's a $10 fee for each designated course to cover the costs of experiential learning in the theater department. And then the last item is a change to policy 3.7, which has to do with refunds and course withdrawals. Previous policy created a fixed dollar penalty for late withdrawal. This amends that for ease of administration within our One College banner system to reimburse only a percentage of the tuition and fees when a late withdrawal occurs. The amount of money is virtually identical. I think it goes from a $50 fee to a $53 reduction in their reimbursement. So it's a very similar, sorry, a $55 reduction in their penalty in their refund. So it has very little financial impact on the students, but this new policy will be easier for the college to implement with their systems as they currently are configured. So those are the 4 items, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I think you mentioned Connecticut State tending Central that was raising the $10 fee.
If I misspoke, I apologize. It
No.
is Central Connecticut State University is adding the $10 fee for the lab fee for theater department. That's correct.
And just to make it, to simplify it a little bit, just said, and he did it well, increase shows up as a $9 increase per credit, $210 annually, but that's only tuition. And then Ben went ahead and mentioned the combination of tuition and fees, which makes it $266, and therefore the difference in the increase to $4,966. Discussion or comments on any of those recommendations by the board, for us to the board? Any comments?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair. I just have a question of when was, I thought that we did something like this back in March. I could be mistaken. It could be something different. Didn't we just raise tuition across the board in March? Are we doing this again?
Address that. In March, there was an action in March to make some small technical changes to the fee schedule. Again, this had to do with our ability to package financial aid for incoming students who they were accepting at Connecticut State. But we deferred any action on the major tuition and fee items, the tuition and fee rates. That we made some small technical changes in March that were necessary in order to continue conducting business. But we deferred action on sort of the main, how high should tuition fees be until we had resolution of the state budget. And based on that, they've asked for this 5% increase. In addition, there was a remaining technical adjustment that they've included in this tuition fee package as well. But all the other elements of the sort of minor technical adjustments that were made in March will remain in effect here, with the exception of the one that is preempted.
So we're raising it twice in 1 year. I just wanted to be clear on that. And another question that I have is, if the justification for these increases in tuition is because of the underperformance of the school, why wouldn't we, again, I'm not saying that I support this, but why wouldn't we be raising it then for all of the institutions that were failing or have deficits?
If this resolution is passed, all of the institutions across CSCU will have raised tuition between, well, at the low end, 2% for graduate employment or graduate students at Charter Oak, 3% for the universities, and 5% for students at the community college, which were recommended by the universities, recommended theirs again in the fall, and then we've proceeded through action on the community colleges in Charter Oak today.
Mr. Chair, I have a comment, if I may.
Parents?
Thank you. So, Regent Stewart, I just wanted to try to clarify, and I can be corrected if I'm not remembering this properly. I believe earlier in the spring, a vote was taken on tuition for the universities at the 4 CSUs, and tuition was increased then for the CSUs, and action was deferred on community colleges and Charter Oak. So let me just fact check that with Ben Barnes, please.
Universities happened in the fall. I believe it was in October we adopted tuition fees for universities at their request to have more time to package students who had been applying. There was action in March that did 2 things. It allowed, it made a series of relatively minor changes that I think impacted tuition overall by less than 1%. in order to, Carrie can probably clarify exactly the change in March. This is subsequent action on the college tuition and fees, which adds a substantive change to the tuition and fees overall, as well as for Charter Oak. So there was action in March, but it was not all, it essentially left the main tuition and fee charges intact, but made changes to some of the smaller items that were necessary to carry out some of the technical transition to one college. I don't know, Carrie has joined us, the CFO for CT State. She may be able to provide more detail if I've misstated.
Yes, thanks, Ben. Good morning, everyone. I'm Carrie Kelly. I'm the CFO for CT State. Just to clarify, in March, 3 changes were made. One, it was the harmonization of the student activity fees. The 12 campuses had very different student activity fees. We needed to harmonize that. The second thing we did was rationalize the basis on which the mandatory student services fee is levied and made it an incremental approach, because before it just kind of went up by various amounts per credit. This made it a little more rational. It was generally revenue neutral. And then the third request, or the third item, was to harmonize the student transportation fee, better known as UPass, that's in effect at 10 campuses. 2 campuses do not participate, Quinebaug Valley and Naugatuck Valley. They have an alternative program at Naugatuck Valley called NV Rides. So those were the 3 things that were done in March. We deferred action on tuition until we had a better understanding of the state budget.
Thank you, Carrie. So for Regent Stewart and for all the regents and anyone kind of participating or watching this meeting, I just want to make sure we're very clear that this is the vote on increasing tuition kind of formally and officially for CT State, and that past actions, though they certainly have an impact, we don't take for granted that any increase of any kind is not serious or substantive. It is not a technical tuition increase. It was adjustments to fees. So again, I just want to make sure that we as an administration are being very clear with our regents and with the public in terms of what those actions are, because there are several steps. And again, again, we have to make sure we don't get confused and that our regents aren't confused and that the public is not confused. So again, I just want to fact check that. I think Regent Stewart wanted to comment as well, but can I fact check that against Ben and Carrie, and then Regent Stewart has a comment?
Yes, I can confirm. You're correct.
Okay, great. So that was just one comment. I do have another comment I wanted to make, but Regent Stewart's been waiting patiently, and I see David Blitz has a comment as well.
Oh, I just said any more money is more money, so I'll defer my time to Mr. Blitz.
Well, before we go to that, Professor Blitz, I just wanted to also add that we've been in a very complicated phase as we've been working to complete the consolidation, the merger of the community colleges into one institution, and clearly adjustments have to be made to unify, and as CFO Kelly said, to harmonize some of the fees and some of the the mechanisms of running an institution of that size. And I think ultimately, your point though is well taken in terms of, I would say, accountability, right? When it comes to institutions or campuses being able to be accountable for their enrollment, for their academic outcomes, and ultimately for being good fiduciaries of the state's investment. So, I just wanted to let you know that, I concur with that sentiment, if that is kind of what you were directing us toward. And it's something that we as institutional leaders and as system leaders are going to continue to try to sharpen and just be better, right? Because at the end of the day, we do have to be even more responsible in that arena.
David Blitz.
I just had a quick question, which was to Ben. Given the increase in the community college fees and tuition, you mentioned that the Pell Grants had increased and would absorb that. But what percentage of students, either full-time or part-time, would not be eligible for the Pell Grants and would have perhaps also additional difficulty in terms of the PACT as well?
The percentage of our students who are eligible for full Pell is around 60%. But that number, I have not seen a number, that's about a year-old number. So I'm not, that may have changed some. I also have not yet seen an analysis of how the changes to the PACT program that were enacted a couple of weeks ago are expected to impact overall eligibility. But the PACT eligibility was expanded by eliminating the no prior college requirement and allowing students who fell below the minimum credit threshold to reestablish PACT when they are able to take more courses. So those two are meaningful expansions of eligibility. Obviously, we're a little concerned about having adequate funding, but we believe there's close, and that we anticipate having a significant number of our students. In the past, it was a quarter of our students, and that number may grow, or no, it's higher than that. Carrie can probably fill in on the share of students who are in PACT, but we expect that to grow. Carrie, can you remind me of the coverage of PACT of our students at the community college?
The number of PACT, I don't have at my fingertips. I'm happy to provide that to the committee after, but Ben was absolutely right. 60% of our students have some form of financial aid met. 40% of our students didn't pay anything at all, meaning they were determined to have the highest need. And just to remind the committee that 15% of every tuition dollar is set aside in institutional aid that's provided to our students. So every time we raise tuition, we correspondingly raise the amount of student financial aid available. But happy to provide that additional information about PACT.
Just an additional comment. Ben mentioned 60%, which are pretty much totally covered. But when you consider those that are partially covered also, we're in excess of 80% of those.
That's not correct.
That's not?
No, that's based on students who fill out FAFSA. If you look at
That's
entire
right,
university, it's
that's
about 40 for PACT. I'm being corrected. 40% are covered fully by either PACT or Pell, and about 60 are covered partially based on their financial need.
So it's closer to 60 than the 80.
Correct. That's right.
Okay. Any other comments? It was, if it's been mentioned several times, I'll just reiterate the point that the community college, Connecticut, state had indicated to us they did not want to increase tuition back in the spring. They wanted to wait, as Ben has already indicated, and that's why we're doing it at the present time and not as we would have in October or back in March. So that's why we're doing it at the present time now with their approval. Okay, I would make a motion to adopt this resolution for tuition and fee adjustments. Do I have a second on that?
Really don't want to, but do I have to?
I would appreciate it very much.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Reluctantly, aye.
Thank you. Resolution's adopted. Okay, the last item, and a big one, is the spending plan for CSCU. And I'll turn that over to Ben. I think it's important everybody understand this because it has a great deal of impact on what's going to be occurring.
If you don't mind, I'm going to put a table up to speak to you.
And are you sharing the screen? Oh, there you go.
Just not doing it particularly gracefully. So, skip over this. This is a summary table of the operating results from the budget that is before you today. Obviously, we were successful in obtaining significantly more state assistance for fiscal '24 than we had received based on the governor's budget and the appropriations committee proposal. And for that, I'm extraordinarily appreciative. And as a result of that additional resource, you can see in fiscal '24, the budget that's proposed before you today amounts to a $13.7 million deficit overall for the system. That includes some institutions with positive operating results and several with negative operating results, including Western Connecticut State University, CT State, and Charter Oak State College. And I'll get to how we propose to address that deficit in fiscal '24 in just a moment. But I think more salient is the projection for fiscal '25 and fiscal $26, because of the state budget action includes a large $115 million, $112 million drop off in state assistance between fiscal '24 and '25, and an additional drop off is implied for fiscal '26. We have, in addition to collecting spending plans from each institution, have asked them all to project their expenses and revenues, tuition and fee revenues and the like, forward through '25 and '26 in order to determine whether, what the financial health of the system looks like during those years 2 and 3 because of the change in state aid. As you can see in fiscal '25, all the institutions, all the member institutions in CT State have negative operating results. And in fiscal '26, they're and even worse. The cumulative deficit for fiscal '25, which is already budgeted at the state level, would be $146 million negative. Like I said, it's about $200 million in fiscal '26. Remember that our overall budget is about I should know exactly our overall, but 1.1. Yeah, it's about $1.2 billion. So $146 million deficit is in excess of a 10% of our annual operating expenses in deficit. So this is a concerning set of results. Get to that in a minute. So the context of this, so in addition to the spending plan, which would produce the results shown in the left-hand column, we've also, the budget resolution includes a number of additional actions which lay out and authorize the system to lead a process for addressing the budget deficits in fiscal '24 and in fiscal '25 and beyond. In particular, these are laid out on page 26 of the staff report. In addition to adopting a spending plan and authorizing this expenditure of funds during fiscal '24, we are asking that the board require that the system develop and administer procedures for all CSU institutions, including the system office, to develop deficit mitigation plans, including specific actions to ensure a balanced budget at each institution in fiscal '25, short-term measures to address the fiscal '24 deficit, specific timelines for implementation, and provisions to ensure that we're complying with our collective bargaining agreements throughout that process. And secondly, the actions require that the system office develop and administer procedures for all CSE institutions to undertake a systematic review of academic offerings in order to ensure that they're meeting student and workforce needs and are financially sustainable within anticipated state subsidy levels and other sources of revenue. That process has begun, is in the beginning stages now. Third, we are authorizing the system. This resolution would authorize this system to retain outside consultants to recommend or assist with changes necessary to ensure institutional fiscal sustainability in the face of financial and demographic changes. Fourth, it would require that all institutions submit their deficit mitigation plans, including any recommended changes to academic programs, changes to hiring practices, and identifying any anticipated need for reserves to support operations during fiscal 24 and 25 to the Board of Regents at a date to be determined. We anticipate that that date will be in the fall, but we've left that open for the determination of President Chang. Fifth, we're requiring that the system, in consultation with the institutions, develop and carry out communications plans, including metrics, public reporting, and internal consultation with CSCU constituencies. We are committed to undertaking all these activities to make changes to our operation and achieve fiscal sustainability, both while embracing transparency with the outside, with third parties, with the state, with our partners and our community, and also relying on existing shared governance structures, consultative commissions and committees and groups at each institution. So we are this resolution requires us to articulate how we are going to ensure that transparency and that internal consultation as we go through this planning process. And finally, this resolution approves the expenditure of up to $4 million from system office reserves to carry out these activities. We appreciate that that there may be a requirement that we use those funds to retain the outside consultants that we are intending to bring along, as well as potential need for outside counsel or other outside professional services to support the levels of change that we believe are necessary for us to achieve fiscal sustainability. So those actions are all reflected in the resolution, in addition to the traditional adoption of the spending plan. There is detail about each of the institutional spending plans contained within the staff report. I apologize, there was an inadvertent insertion of a second copy of a tuition and fee resolution in the middle of the staff report. We'll correct that for the final version, so please ignore pages 30 and 31 of the staff report, which are not on point. A couple of other items I want to identify. One is that this spending plan reflects the change in the model for administration of fringe benefits that was enacted with the state budget several weeks ago. Under this change, I'm going to show you a slide about that. Under this change, previously, we would pay for the fringe benefits only of operating fund employees, but most employees, almost all of them at the community colleges and about half of them at the universities, were covered by block grant funds, by the annual block grant that the state provides to us. And those employees whose salaries were paid from the block grant, as a matter of law, up until now, had had their fringe benefits covered directly by the state of Connecticut. Now the law has changed so that the state, as a matter of law, will cover the pension obligation, the pension and retirement obligations, so pension and ARP, for all employees in CSCU, but that CSCU operating fund will cover the health benefits and other components of fringe benefits. So health benefits, FICA, unemployment insurance, life insurance, those are all relatively small. Health insurance is the large one. We will cover those costs for all of our employees. So they've essentially changed how we share fringe benefits costs. And they've made a make whole payment to CSCU as part of that transition, with the intention that that payment make this a cost neutral item for us. The slide that you see here shows recent history of what our total fringe benefits costs have been. You can see between 23, we paid $454 million in fringe benefits, but that number goes down to $180 million in fiscal 24. That is a reflection of the fact that we are now only paying for the health benefits portion. However, so that's a good part, the reduction in the overall cost. However, you can see the second row that the general fund fringe benefit support goes away. So we've lost those revenues. In addition, as part of the overall reduction in state aid that was included in the governor's and the adopted state budget, you can see that the third line down, additional operating fund fringe benefits paid by the state, which we've been receiving since fiscal 19, those have been eliminated as well. They have made the make whole payment. This is the $41.7 million that you can see for fiscal 24 helps. But overall, the net impact of this is that fringe benefits will cost the system's students funded from student tuition will amount to $138 million for fiscal 24 compared to $58 million last year. A great portion, a lion's share of that increase is the elimination of the additional operating fund fringe benefits paid for by the state. But there's additional shortfall that is the result of the fact that the make whole payment was calculated based on fiscal 22 data rather than fiscal 24 actual or projected information. So this is a more expensive overall for the system. And I thought that this elaboration was useful in understanding. That is one of the factors that is causing us financial stress in fiscal 24 and certainly beyond that. Finally, I want to point out where we are as a starting point in terms of reserves that we believe are available for operations at the direction of the board. Bear in mind that that the institutions cannot use reserves. CSU, any of the institutions here must obtain the Board of Regents approval to utilize reserves for operating purposes. That is why the resolution includes an explicit approval of up to $4 million for costs associated that the system will have to bear associated with the deficit mitigation activities that we have described. But this table shows for each of the institutions within CSCU the amount of reserves that are identified on our fiscal 22 financial statements, the unrestricted net position adjusted for pension liabilities. And then we have identified those funds that are not restricted, but have been designated by institutions within the system. We went through all the designated fund balances and identified those which we recommend maintaining. Those tend to be for ongoing activities where we have a fund balance to support continuation of either grant-funded activities or of student activities that are where we are holding resources to support those activities on an ongoing basis. In addition, there's a $49 million designated fund balance within the system office. Those are the accumulated surplus university fee proceeds, which have been earmarked historically by the board for payment of debt service for bonds issued through the Connecticut Higher Education Facilities Authority, on behalf of the universities for auxiliary facilities. We have outstanding debt, and those funds are held to make future debt service payments and are identified in our indenture as funds available to pay those debts. So we believe it's recommended for us to preserve that fund balance and not to use it for operations, and so that it can be used for future debt service payments. The result is that we have a total of $137 million available across the university system in the amounts you've shown here, and $99 million at CT State and about $7.5 million at Charter Oak. These numbers do not reflect the results of operations in fiscal 23. Those results are, at least on a budget basis, anticipated to be positive and will likely add to these reserves. But we will not know the specific amount that they would add to those reserves until the financial audit is completed toward the end of this calendar year. But the reserves are at a strong point, certainly the strongest since my tenure began in 2019. And those reserves, at least overall, and that's a blessing for the system now, considering we may ultimately need to draw down on reserves in some instances to the extent that we have timing issues in terms of achieving the savings necessary to restore fiscal sustainability. However, again, those reserves are not available to institutions on a planned basis unless approved by the Board of Regents. To the extent that any of the institutions believe that they need to rely on reserves in fiscal 24, that will be brought before you when they provide deficit mitigation plans in the fall of 2024. So I am happy to take any questions about individual spending plans or any of the items contained within them at your request, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Questions by any members? Can't see them. David.
I believe Mayor Stewart had actually put up her hand first, so I'll defer to her.
Why, thank you, sir. I have a bunch of questions today. Let me just pull them up here. Mr. Barnes, as you were reading from the list of items that the resolution seeks to do, again, this is my first spending plan, so I'm not sure if this is common practice. So I have like a basic question, because I don't, and you have to help me out here. How do you accept a spending plan without knowing what your deficit mitigation plans are?
Well, the reason we are doing it this way is because the individual institutions require adoption of a spending plan in order to continue to expend funds after July 1st in order to continue to operate. So that's one of the reasons we did not defer action on a spending plan until we had fully elaborated our approach to deficit mitigation. So the reason that we did it in two steps is so that we could take action now in order to continue operating our institutions over the summer and prepare for the fall semesters, continue to pay salaries, et cetera.
Is that set in, is that identified in statute, or is that just policy?
It's because the statutes that authorize the existence of the Board of Regents give the Board of Regents the sole authority to spend money on behalf of the institutions at CSCU. And so the existing authorization was for a spending plan that ran through June 30th, 2023. So we are authorized to continue spending money through this week, but or next week, whenever the 30th is. I'm getting ahead of myself. But we don't have authorization to spend beyond that. Now, obviously, in the absence of this, we have other laws that would require us to, for instance, I mean, we have collective bargaining agreements that would require us to continue funding those salaries. But I believe that it is preferable for there to be board action approving the continued operation of the system while we go through the process of determining what the appropriate deficit mitigation steps are. Understanding that we think it's important that process occur at each institution under the guidance of the system and following procedures that are recommended.
So when you, okay, so everybody, in accordance with what we're passing today, we're going to keep paying the bills past the first of the year, but we're doing that without knowing what our deficit mitigation plans are, which is what you are tasking to be done in number 1 in your staff report, right? But what I didn't see and what I have curiosity on is a date for that. So you don't have any, and not the specific timelines for implementation, but I'm wondering when are you going to make the deficit mitigation plans due?
I've targeted, in my mind, I think we are hoping to have those before the board in the fall, likely in the October cycle of board meetings. But there are a number of factors that create some uncertainty around that, particularly around potential bargaining with our unions. So there are very specific collective bargaining requirements that are involved with many of the actions that might be included in a deficit mitigation plan, including changes to academic programs, including changes to the terms and conditions of employment for any of our employees. So because of that, we have not specified a date because we want to make sure that we have ample time to carry out all the procedures necessary in our 7 collective bargaining agreements in order to comply fully with those as we go through the deficit mitigation process.
So then will the board and this committee have to then revisit the spending plan for fiscal year 24 and 25 after your deficit mitigation plans have been completed? So in essence, what I'm getting at is you're going to have to alter the spending plan based off of how that goes. We're going to have to come back to the table and then approve this again.
Yes, my anticipation is that those plans would be submitted to you in a form that you would accept them, and by so doing, you would modify this spending plan to conform with the new deficit mitigation steps at each institution.
So I feel uncomfortable not having a time frame or set dates for this, just my feelings. But, you know, as we go down your list of actions that have to happen, I feel the same, you know, about the second item that you talked about, requiring the system office to develop and administer procedures for this systematic review of academic offerings. Again, not knowing a date or a time frame on that. I'm just going to go down my comments on each item that you're talking about. Some of them have answers. Some of them, I suppose, are just more rhetorical. The third item you talked about here was that we're authorizing the system to retain outside consultants to recommend changes necessary to ensure with institutional sustainability. I do have a question on that. You know, if we're giving blanket authorization, does the authorization for said consultants whom we don't know of who they are yet, does that come back to the board for approval to hire?
No, that would not. The selection, we would select you within the normal state restrictions. So either off of an existing contract or through an RFP process. So we would enter into that contract on the basis of this. I mean, as it's recommended, obviously, this resolution would authorize the probably the signatories would be myself or Terrence to enter into that agreement with the outside consultants.
Okay, again, I'm a little uncomfortable about that. Next, you talked about, again, the institutions to submit their deficit mitigation plans, including those recommended changes to academic programs. Again, we talk about timeframes. I just don't know how comfortable I feel on voting something as serious as this that doesn't have a date to it. And then at the last one, you talk about approving the expenditure of up to 4 million of system reserves. And it says to support the activities necessary to plan and implement the changes that we don't know what they are yet, that don't have timeframes of when I know what they're going to be. So I'm going to be giving you a signature on a $4 million check to spend something on what I'm not sure what it is yet. So these are my concerns with what we're talking about today.
I can tell you that the anticipated expenditures are significantly for a consultant that we would bring in, who we don't know how much that will be, but we anticipate a significant engagement that will cost as much as $1 million potentially. So we're trying to give ourselves the ability to move there. We also believe that we may have requirement for outside counsel expenses that are related to the deficit mitigation plans. Those are undetermined, but something that we believe is important that we have access to appropriate counsel for certain specialized activities. We also, there may be additional, more specialized consultants that we believe are appropriate to bring in, depending on the particular provisions of the deficit mitigation actions that are recommended by the campuses. I share your concern about the uncertainty regarding timelines. We have been planning and laying out the ranges of expected timelines for completing different tasks within this over the summer. And we believe that our target, as I said, is October. But I also am aware that we're working with a lot of institutions. We're committed to a shared governance, and all those things take time, a little unpredictable in terms of getting to the plans, particularly around academic programs and other things that are involved in this process. So I understand your concern, and we have tried to minimize that with this set of actions. But I understand that we are asking you to delegate the selection of that timing and the conclusion of that, identifying how that process concludes to the administration and to President Chang.
I'm not sure that I can feel comfortable supporting this unless there's some type of amendment to the resolution that gives a time frame.
I would be comfortable. I don't believe that a time frame sooner than the end of the year is. I mean, I obviously I will work with whatever time frame the board wishes to provide, but I anticipate this is going to take a number of months, and that we will be bringing you a revised plan and deficit mitigation steps close to the end of the calendar year. Obviously, if you were to establish a deadline and subsequent events would make that deadline difficult or for one reason or another unadvisable to maintain, I would come back before you and ask for additional time. With that stated out loud, I would be happy to accept a time limit, but I don't anticipate that a time limit sooner than late in 2023 is practical given my awareness of all the critical path items between now and then.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to be out of line. I just want to make sure that my concerns are being said out loud. And I don't know if, if you agree with me on this. I know we certainly haven't talked about it. I don't know the other members of the committee's, comfortability with setting a time frame. I just know it would make me feel better.
Terrence?
David's been waiting patiently, and then I'll go after David.
No, it's all right, President Cheng. If you want to respond directly to Mayor Stewart, please go ahead.
I mean, I concur with Mayor Stewart that a timeline for actions and, kind of definition and accountability is something that we should add. It's this is going to sound like an excuse, but it's not meant to be, right? It's complicated in that there are a variety of factors that make this entire endeavor quite nebulous, right? And this is, again, not making excuses or deflecting, but the facts are that each one of our contracts with our bargaining units have very particular timelines for certain actions, depending on which actions an institution will engage in. And even in certain actions, there are pre-actions to get to a certain point. Again, it depends on which article of which contract you might choose to engage in or enact. We always want to provide the right amount of time for shared governance to take place, because this has to be a transparent and collaborative process. And so that is another thing that we're trying to account for. But hear you loud and clear that we don't want folks taking action when we haven't provided enough detail, enough context, or enough information for that vote to be taken with confidence. But I don't think it's unreasonable or inappropriate for us to kind of make those adjustments and add that detail so that there is more information for the board to work with and to vote on. But it is a multi-layered, it's a multi-pronged process. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure we're getting this right because we want to be fair, not just in terms of tackling the system's challenges and concerns, but the system is comprised of individual institutions, as we know. And these individual institutions, as you could see from the previous slide in the presentation, some are in much stronger situations than others when it comes to dealing with their particular deficit, challenges. And so we want to enable each individual institution and its president and its leadership and its faculty and staff and bargaining units to really engage in conversations that are germane to those individual institutions and not try to paint or sweep with too broad of a brush. So again, that just adds a level of nuance and granularity that makes the macro endeavor that much more complicated. But all that said, agree with you that a timeline for this activity and for all this work is something that we should provide.
Other comments? Erin, do you want to comment back? Anything else you want to add to that?
I would love to entertain some type of motion to add a time frame somewhere to the resolution, and then I would be very happy.
Just a thought that there's so many pieces to this puzzle. It isn't like it's a simple thing. Between the budget that's just been passed, between the different institutions that we cover, and are going to be requesting information from, et cetera, et cetera. I could see maybe putting one out there, a timeline. We've done it before, partly because of the fact that it is fluid all the time as things move along. But if we did it with the understanding that we may have to make adjustments to it because of situations that will occur over the course of the next several months, I don't think I have a problem with that, as Terrence has indicated.
I do believe that, you have a lot of people who are kind of on pins and needles here, wondering if their jobs are still going to exist, wondering, the status of their institution. I think it's probably in our best interest for some type of setting some type of parameter so that people at least know, okay, at least here's a date that we'll have some kind of answers by.
About if we did, just in consultation, just briefly, Aaron, or just asking or commenting with Ben because of this whole thing. And of course, most of this falls on his shoulders and his staff. If we did like a November 1 timeline, with the understanding that we may have to look at that again or move forward, because then it puts a little bit of, which I do like, a little bit of pressure on everybody else involved in the process, that they know that they were looking at a number and a date that needs to be adhered to. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, could I offer that, to put that in the form of a motion, that you could move to amend the second resolved in the resolution and change it to read the last sentence, shall be submitted to the Board of Regents by November 1st, 2023, and be it further, rather than at a date recommended.
Would you like me to make that motion?
Eating it into the record, you trying to do your work for you.
Thanks. I just wasn't sure, I don't want to step on Mr. Chair's toes here. Sure, I'd like to propose that amendment to say exactly what Mr. Barnes just said.
Would second that motion. Thank you. Further
Thank you.
discussion on that? Hearing none. David, I'm sorry. You're going to comment?
It's not specifically on the motion, although if I had a vote, I would certainly vote for it. It's the other more general comments that I want to make on the resolution itself. So I'm not quite sure if now is the moment to speak or whether you want to vote on the amendment first.
I prefer voting on the amendment first, David, then if it's okay
Go
with
ahead.
you.
Go ahead.
Okay, any other further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the amendment to the resolution, signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you.
Opposed? The amendment's adopted. Now, further on this, on the resolution, David?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of comments and what would have been amendments if I was able to make amendments, but I will simply propose them in this case. In the first place, I'd like to just say something positive before I make a number of criticisms. I'm known for making criticisms at this meeting. I guess it's perhaps my role and place on the committee, which is a shout out to one of the institutions. It happens to be my own, but that's just by chance, which has managed its finances in an exemplary way. And I refer to page 34 of the agenda today, which explains the steps, reasonable steps, which were taken to continue a reduction plan implemented in 2021 and to apply sound fiscal measures to new hirings and filling of positions done at CCSU. If that had been done elsewhere, and in particular at Western Connecticut State University, and also by the previous interim executive of the CSCC, we wouldn't be in all of the fiscal difficulties that we are in now. That said, I want to refer to the resolution itself, and there are a number of points that I want to make. First of all, I'm referring now to page 71 and the fourth whereas, which indicates a number of reasons for the deficit. For example, low enrollment from the pandemic, rising faculty and staff costs, declining state and adverse changes in fringe benefits. But to be truly honest and to be somewhat self-critical, it seems to me that this committee should add as well a miscalculation of savings to be expected from the consolidation of the community colleges. It has been known since 2018, when 6 different planning groups met, that the so-called $44 million savings that were one of the impetuses, in fact, one of the major impetus for the consolidation of the community colleges, were not going to be had. Yet, fiscal measures of control over posting of job positions at the community college were never subsequently implemented. Perhaps they are now, but I certainly look through the weekly announcements of job postings and give as an example on 7/8/21 when 22 positions were posted, on 8/25/21 when 54 positions were posted, on 3/31/22 when 6 deans, 4 board of regents, and 7 other administrative positions for a total of 17 were posted. And that's just 3 examples of the more than 500, I gave up counting at 500 job postings between those 2 periods, less than a year and a half at the community college level, either for individual community colleges, for the CSCC, at that point still not accredited, although I note that the NESHE has given its initial accreditation as of Monday of this week, and even of the Board of Regents, where surprisingly, a total of 35 positions were advertised, all at management confidential, senior administration, or senior professional levels. That said, I think it should be included that there was a miscalculation of savings from the consolidation of the community colleges. I would even go further and say misrepresentation, but I'm trying to be as diplomatic as I can. Secondly, on page 72, when we look at the proposals for establishing procedures for mitigation plans, I think it is certainly understandable that the president and soon to be chancellor of the CSU play a leading role. But it seems to me that that should also mention explicitly the leadership of CSCU, to include the provost, and I think as well the CFO, as well as the leadership of the Board of Regents, namely its chair and vice chair, so that there are a group of people making these significant decisions at the initiative of the president and chancellor of the system, as the case may be, so that there are a broader group of people involved in the initial consultations of something which is so significant for the system and its institutions and its members as well. So I would like to have seen reference to the CSU president and CSU leadership and the Board of Regents leadership in the second of the resolves on page 72, that the CSU president shall lead all CSU institutions. Thirdly, there's a question of the $4 million. I think that that's a excessive amount of money to be used, even if it comes from the system office reserves and will not be taken out of operating expenses. I note in passing that in the budget approved by the legislature, there is a CSCU system study proposed for $250,000. That's item T1872 on page 83 of the 832-page document as adopted by the legislature. That's to be housed, I believe, in the Office of Policy and Management. They're talking about $250,000. We're talking about a sum 16 times that size without having specified who are the consultants, except in some generic way that consultants will be hired, that lawyers may be hired, and so forth. And I think that that is not a responsible way of spending monies allocated to the system or available through its reserves. I would say some 1/10 of that, at $400,000, might be more appropriate, but I'm just at that point guessing. Personally, I think that this item should be removed from the resolution and brought back in a form with specific measures and specific proposals, rather than the blank check that we have here. Finally, in the last of the resolves, it says the CSU president shall develop and carry out communication plans to ensure that efforts under the resolution reflect CSU's commitment to shared governance and public transparency. It seems to me that there's more than just a communication plan, whatever the case may be with respect to a system examination, but rather a communication plan and full consultation with the various institutions and through shared governance with faculty and staff, that should be included. And moreover, that leads me to my last point, and that is the third to last resolve. The Board of Regents charges that CSU leadership engage with a higher education management consultant firm to conduct a thorough data-driven analysis of organization structures, policies, practices, and to make recommendations. I would add to that, it's not simply data-driven, but it has to be consistent with academic standards and shared governance to include as well a data-driven analysis. Otherwise, it becomes far too quantitative, although that should be the basis, and neglects the qualitative factors and neglects as well the prime importance in public higher education of academic standards and shared governance. So those are a series of amendments, which I normally would have made if this were a normal committee, if I were even counted as a member of the committee for quorum, although I've attended every meeting for the last 4 years. Those are measures which I would have proposed as amendments to improve this resolution. I would hope that somebody would make at least some of them. If not now, then I will circulate it to members of the board for the meeting of the board when it convenes next Wednesday. Thank you.
David, why don't you do that? Because I didn't catch everything, certainly, that you're commented on, et cetera, to the members of this committee anyway, to take a look at and maybe discuss.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you. Always appreciate Professor Blitz and his very detailed, thorough engagement. As I've said before, and I will continue to say, I think this is the kind of engagement that it sharpens us, right? It makes us better. It makes us stronger when we have this type of, scrutiny, but not in a negative way, right? I think when we care about something and we give this kind of energy and attention and detail, it is meant to make us a better organization. And so I do appreciate it. A few just responses to Professor Blitz's recommendations. I mean, first, I'll say this is a normal committee. It just so happens, Professor Blitz, you don't vote on this one, but you do vote on other committees in a variety of ways. In terms of the amendment that you recommended, I made a note, kind of clarifying or expanding the responsibility or the onus to go beyond just the system president / chancellor, but to include system leadership. I think some of that is taken for granted in the language, that obviously it is not just one individual that does this kind of work, but it is the entire team. But I have no problem with, personally, I have no problem with, kind of expanding the language to include a system leadership team or institutional leaders and, so on and so forth under the guidance and direction of the BOR or whatever that kind of edit or adjustment might look like. I think our CFO colleagues are going to have some comments on your assertions that the work of the past 6+ years has not saved any money. So I will let our CFO colleagues respond to that. But I do think it's important also to note that with the $4 million in this resolution that is noted, and your kind of juxtaposition or comparison of that to what is in the recently signed state budget of $250,000 set aside, as much as it pains us to have to expend resources on this type of work, with external partners. When we believe it is absolutely necessary and mission critical to doing this right, it is something that it is incumbent upon us to absorb that cost and that responsibility. In our experience, this type of work at this level, for the duration that we believe it would entail, and for the type of acumen and expertise we would need to bring in to really help the system move in the direction we all want it to move, it's going to be way more than $250,000. I'll just tell you that right now. And again, that's something that we don't like that, and we try not to spend that kind of money with outside consultants because we take our fiduciary responsibilities as an organization very seriously. But that said, when there are industry experts that have gone through this at a, again, national and even global level that can help us to get the job done right, in an inclusive but clearly well excavated, detailed, and professional manner on a certain timeline, then we think that is our responsibility to bring in those assets and those resources that need be. So completely understand, though, that again, signing that proverbial blank check is something that's a bit daunting, right? It's not something that we would do in day-to-day practice. And so any way we can sharpen that, or again, build more confidence and accountability, I'm all for that. But I do want to just kind of point out that we are not necessarily comparing, apples to apples when we look at a budget line here versus a budget line there and what have you. We've thought very carefully about the types of assets and resources we need to bring to the table to do this work. And so I just want to kind of reaffirm that, this is not an arbitrary or capricious number we're just pulling out of a hat. There has been a lot of research and analysis. So, but let me pass over to our CFO colleagues, Mr. Barnes and Ms. Kelly, for some thoughts on the other comment that you made about the savings from the consolidation. Thank you.
I would just, I'll turn it over to Carrie for a little bit more detail, but the board has requested from staff repeatedly during my tenure over the last four years or so, information about the success of our achievement of savings goals, which I think were originally $24 million from the consolidation of the community colleges. Because the consolidation occurred over a long period of time, over 5 years or more, that it's difficult to ascribe one particular savings to that merger. However, we have made a number of different calculations and approaches to measuring the savings. And I think all of those have demonstrated that the savings exist. We've demonstrated it through review of attrition. We've demonstrated it by comparing budget forecasts at the adoption of the merger plan with actual budget results 4 or 5 years later. I believe that the savings from that plan did materialize and continue to be embedded within the budget for CT State, that we would be significantly more expensive if we had never undertaken the merger today than we are today. But I'll turn it over to my colleague Carrie Kelly, who may have more details.
Thanks, Ben, and thanks to the Finance Committee for the opportunity to comment on this. When I joined the Board of Regents, or the CSC rather, in 2020, I built on the work of my predecessors who had forecast significant savings through the consolidation. And as Ben said, we have assessed and continue to review that. We know that through cumulative gross administrative savings, meaning underfilling positions, holding positions vacant, or recasting them into the new roles better aligned with the consolidation, that we've achieved approximately $34 million in cumulative savings. And let me pause and explain how we calculate that. So for example, in FY14, that resulted in $3.9 million in personnel savings and a corresponding $2.4 million in fringe benefits. That yields $6.4 million from 2018 in positions that were underfilled, held vacant, or recast into their new roles. That continues on into the future. So each year we've had cumulative savings that adds to that. So by FY23, the current year, that's yielded $34.5 million in savings. And we have an extensive analysis I'm happy to share with anyone so that we can see that. I think that's juxtaposed against the reality that we have to operate our facilities, our campuses, and continue to hire. So Professor Blitz is absolutely right when he points to a number of postings that are out there. We continue to hire faculty and staff that are critical to serving our students. But we've done so with a judicious approach by reviewing every position that's permanent and full-time coming through the request to fill process. So the CT State Cabinet looks at absolutely every position that's permanent or full-time to understand how it's going to operate. And since we had an understanding in the spring, I would say probably April, of what our fiscal position looked like, we have implemented a modified hiring process. So we've been taking a more judicious approach than even before when considering positions. But as you know, the biggest single expenditure in our institutions are our people. And so having control of which positions we choose to refill, underfill, or leave vacant is a critical decision. So we've achieved these savings over time through this process. We've continued to assess how we've done on this, and we've been very transparent with the board. I'm happy to share and enter into the record the number of times that we've tried to calculate these savings and then how we assess ourselves. How do we benchmark how we're doing? So, I want to point to the February 16th, 2021 Finance Committee, where we assessed the 2018 projections and looked at those again to see how we were doing. So we've tried to be incredibly transparent and clear about how we're calculating the savings, what they look like. If we had not taken these actions, if my predecessors and now the CT State Cabinet had not taken these actions, we would be in a far worse fiscal position. So that's a little bit about how we got where we are and how we continue to look at that and continue to assess.
Other comments,
For that-
David, you still have the floor?
Yeah, thank you for that response. But I remain concerned when I look at the deficit summary, which Ben Barnes just presented to us. When we look at CT State, it goes from 33.6 million in FY24 to 97.8 in FY25 to 124.6 in FY26. That is a significantly increasing deficit. But I will leave that to one aside and just return to the issue of the $4 million for the study. It may well be that the OPM study at 250,000 is low in terms of the figure. But it strikes me that without further information as to who are the outside consultants, why lawyers with outside lawyers, in addition to the council, which is already, there's already a system council at the system office, why that would be necessary. And I put that in relation to the April 24th press release, which talked about 650 layoffs of full-time faculty and staff, up to 3,000 cutbacks to part-time faculty at the community college, increases in tuition, well, we've seen that already today, and elimination of programs with high overheads. That has to be made explicit, whether, number one, that series of remediation measures, I'll put it that way as politely as I can, are still in effect. Now, and number two, why outside attorneys would be necessary over and above the attorneys and the legal staff that are already there at the system office. That leaves open to speculation as to the kind of changes that would be envisaged. But I'll return to just one small point. If I had a vote, I would certainly vote to return the $4 million figure, not to include that on the agenda for the board meeting until there is a clear statement of how that money is going to be spent. And I would say a significant reduction in the amount. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Get your comments out to us, your suggestions. I know.
Yes,
Terrence
I'll
made-
follow up on your suggestion,
Yes.
Chair Balducci, and I will make that and send it to everybody here.
Aside from that, we have one amendment to this resolution, which was made by the mayor of New Britain. Which is the only change we have moving forward. So we have that one amendment to this resolution. Any further discussion on the resolution as it is at the moment?
I would just add, the good news with this revenue budget.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I'm running a Capital Workforce Partners meeting at the same time right now, so I'm trying to like double duty here. Fun times when you're being pulled in 5 different directions. I will say, for the purpose of just getting this through to the full board, I will vote in support of this right now. However, don't be surprised if I consider giving it a thumbs down when it's at the full board, because of the other questions that I had and just not feeling comfortable with allowing these contracts to be voted on without any approval process from us. But I just wanted to put that out there.
Appreciate that. Thank you for your candid remarks. Now, I will make the motion to adopt the resolution as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is adopted as amended. Thank you. I don't see any further business before us, thank God. I would ask for I would make the motion to end this meeting. There's no further business before us, so.
I'll second that.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You.
And your live stream is stopped.